Meagan Flynn, Washington Post, with us to talk about, I mean, I know your colleague, my friend Sam Fortier, called it a Hail Mary. We can call it a miracle. We can call it whatever we want, anything in that realm, that the RFK site now belongs to D.C. thanks to some late night maneuvering in Congress. And Meagan, I mean, we thought this thing was dead. We thought it was alive earlier in the week, that it was dead. Now it's not only alive, like it's through. What the heck happened between the time that the full spending bill got spiked and this provision was removed and whatever time in the morning it was last night that this thing passed by unanimous consent in the Senate?
Yeah, it was a really remarkable development considering everyone's operating belief the whole week was that this spending bill was the last avenue for the RFK bill to pass Congress. When it was included in the spending bill, the belief was this is happening. The spending bill was needed to avert a government shutdown, and some version of it had to pass. Once RFK was removed, everyone thought, well, I guess there's not going to be an RFK bill. But the Senate came through with unanimous consent, which is a mechanism that no one really considered before because a single objection is enough to kill a bill on unanimous consent. Considering we knew that Maryland senators did not like the RFK bill, there were also some Republican critics, chiefly Mike Lee of Utah. And so unanimous consent was just really not even seen as a viable path, assuming a single one of those senators would just raise their hand and say, no, I object. But somehow, between yesterday and very early this morning, they were not opposed. And we are actively working right now to figure out how that happened. It's really remarkable. And, I think as we reported today, a couple things were really important here. One, Maryland, which has been really a key player in all the negotiations on RFK because they have a big interest in not losing the commanders to DC. They wanted a few things. One, assurance of what would happen to Northwest Stadium should the commanders leave. They did get an MOU on that. They also wanted, very critically for their state, full federal funding to rebuild the Baltimore Bridge, the Francis Scott Key Bridge,
Right.
Which they got in the spending bill. Lastly, they wanted DC's National Guard fighter jets. That was not in the spending bill that we saw, but we heard yesterday that there were some productive negotiations late into the night where they were seeking assurances that they could find another way to get the jets, which were reportedly told they have gotten those assurances. So all of this came together very quickly, and about 1:15 a.m., the bill passed on unanimous consent.
So just to give our mostly sports audience some context here, what else, like how many other things got passed in this way? Because there was a number of things that got stripped out of the funding bill that ultimately, like the version that gets passed to avoid a government shutdown. Was there a bunch of stuff that then wound up getting standalone votes and passing or not? Or was this kind of a one-off situation that this was important to enough people that it got done?
Yeah, it certainly was not necessarily a one-off, and it's really quite separate from things in the spending bill, with the exception of once the jets were out, Maryland also wanted to find another way to figure out how to get their fighter jets. But this process is typically reserved for uncontroversial bills that no one will object to. And that's exactly why this was on no one's radar for RFK.
We're talking about like naming a post office.
Yeah, things like, unanimous consent. Everyone cool with this? Like, yes, sounds good. Right. And so, there were some other bills that went up for unanimous consent that I wasn't tracking terribly closely. Certainly none as high profile as the RFK bill.
And we know that this also had to pass the House on their side of it. Was this something that had already been passed by the House and was kind of in Chuck Schumer's hands? Or James Comer, who's the head of the Oversight Committee, which oversees the federal government's oversight of D.C., as well as just general oversight, but D.C. governance in Congress is kind of, for the audience, like in that committee. He's a Republican from Kentucky. His argument is that we're maintaining this 190-acre land. It's costing us millions and millions of dollars. He wanted the RFK bill, and he and Mayor Bowser had actually been advocates for this together to get done. So was there a final push from Comer on the House side, or was this always in Chuck Schumer's hands? And eventually he was like, wait, I think we can do this.
Absolutely. James Comer, from what I've been told, has been very involved behind the scenes and advocating for this. He was the chief. He led the bill. He introduced the bill. He played a role in getting other Republicans to support it. And he had been pushing for this up till the very end. That said, yes, Chuck Schumer, he ultimately is who brought it to the floor to go up for a vote, and his position in all of this, from when the negotiations really started heating up, was that he wanted to see Maryland reach an agreement with the team. He didn't want to be stuck choosing between them, essentially, on what to do. And so in this case, it does seem like those parties worked out an agreement, and therefore Chuck Schumer brought it to the floor.
Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader from New York, which is where the NFL offices are located. Do we know if Roger Goodell or Josh Harris or anybody involved on the team side or the NFL side perhaps gave Chuck a late night call, being like, "Hey man, can you put this up for a vote before you get out of there?"
Not that I've been told, but I know obviously that in their reactions, they were very excited to see this pass.
So then we have the DC part of this. This is finally in DC's hands, which is where it should be, but that does not mean that there's a 100% chance that a stadium gets built there. What's the state of play within the district right now, and the chances that a stadium gets approved, and how much of that depends on the funding side of it? Like if Josh Harris raised his hand and was like, I'll pay for it, me and my many partners worth many billions of dollars, versus, hey, we need a little bit here, or we need at least certain commitments. Like, what's the state of play in DC?
Yeah, I mean, I think the DC Council would be very happy to hear Josh Harris say that, although I don't
Of
know that
course.
there's really been no specifics discussed about what a potential deal could look like between the city and the Commanders. That said, if it does involve public funds, it will have to go through the DC Council, where lawmakers have been split on the issue of whether to use taxpayer money to fund a football stadium. There are some different strokes of that. Some lawmakers say, okay, we can use taxpayer funds, but just for the infrastructure around the stadium to kind of help build it, but not the stadium itself. So there's different variations of those positions, but they're not quite at like a majority, at least publicly, or if anything's changed for the past year or so, it's not quite been clear, a clear, strong majority. But there's certainly, a lot of council members, namely Kenyon McDuffie, who's really supportive. He oversees the Economic Development Committee, who are very supportive of the stadium. And so certainly it's going to be a huge topic of debate on the DC Council.
So when Glenn Ivey, the congressman from Maryland who represents the district where Northwest Stadium currently resides, was on with my colleagues Grant and Danny the other day, he had some details that I had not heard that were fairly specific about where the stadium could go on the current land in Landover. He's like, oh, if we move it here, it's more accessible to the metro, and this other metro stop actually becomes better. There seem to be some concrete plans. I think I heard you say this, but just to clarify, double click. As far as you know, there's actually no concrete plans. There's no drawings. Mayor Bowser and some architect hired by the Commanders haven't had any kind of meetings where we actually know what this, she said, oh, stadium, multi-purpose, whatever. There's actually plans for what that could look like.
Not that's been publicly released in any great detail. There's certainly been discussions. I think she's recently said on another radio show that maybe we should have a retractable roof so that you can do more things year round. But no like clear renderings, but definitely lots of ideas. The mayor has frequently talked about wanting to see like a mixed development. So, restaurants, retail, hotels, entertainment options for people so that it's not just parking lot football stadium, which is what it is right now, essentially.
Yeah, parking lot, stadium, and I guess greenery. It's not
Yes,
wasteland,
and
but
absolutely, there's actually requirements in the bill for
yes.
green space. So we're not going
Yeah.
to lose, the access to the Anacostia River or trail or anything like that. That's really supposed to be enhanced under the legislation.
And just to clarify as well, there's also a stipulation that there's no federal funding for stadium, because that was obviously thrown around in a very misinformed kind of way the other day. But there's no federal funding, no federal tax dollars that will go to a Commander Stadium, or really at this point anything else in this bill, right?
That's right. Contrary to false information that was circulating on Wednesday and amplified by Elon Musk, there is no taxpayer money involved in this RFK legislation. And in fact, yes, it does prohibit the use of federal funds for a football stadium.
So if there is any public funds, it will be those of us that live in the district that will pay for it.
That's right.
Okay, we'll deal with that within DC, but that's the point. Is it's our call as it is for jurisdictions around the country. Okay, Maryland is going to make their pitch. We talked to your colleague Aaron Cox about that the other day, who covers Maryland very closely. What kind of timeline do you think between Maryland and DC and Virginia? You know, if there's another Hail Mary to be had here, Commander season's full of them. If they want to get back involved, what kind of timeline is realistic for negotiations, things getting through city council, real proposals sitting on Josh Harris's desk for he and his team to decide we want to go here or there?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, I don't think this is going to move like lightning fast. But I think everyone who has been wanting to see DC formally enter the negotiations, that at least, I'm sure that those phone calls will be quick to at least kickstart things. As for seeing like a deal emerge or a decision between Maryland or DC, I think that really is quite unknown about like how fast or slow that may materialize.
And I don't know if you know this from previous stadiums, whether it be, you know, Capital One Arena back in the day. Obviously, there was just the, you know, different version of Capital One Arena with the renovations, or Nats Park. But is this something, I guess I'm trying to, I know we don't have specifics, but a window of by the end of 2025, could this decision be made? Or are we talking a decision being made in 2027 when the Commanders would already, you know, forget having started construction? Like, they're going to have to extend their lease because they have to play through 2027 as is. But their hope is to be in by 2030. If they don't start construction until 2027 because they haven't made a decision, like, that's getting pushed way out. So from when DC in the past, city council has had to rule on these things, do we have any idea how long it's taken, what the precedent is here?
That's a great question. I mean, it could take months on the council.
But months is not years. Months, considering we've been waiting for this for a decade, like months, we can wait months. We could do that, Meagan.
Yeah, I think really, you know, this will proceed in multiple stages. One is going to be DC and Maryland putting forth proposals, talking to the team, you know, kind of envisioning what's possible. There's really no telling how long that could take. Then there's going to be you know, internally with the team is going to have to make a decision about what to do, what they want, you know, what makes the most sense. And then we'll see more public debate if there is a deal on whether to move forward with it. And if it's in DC, you know, what kind of taxpayer funds are involved, if at all.
Is there a chance that it's like a ballot measure? Yeah. Is it like something that we might be voting on as district residents next November? Or is it something that's going to be decided by the council? Like, we've already voted for the council members, they decide for us, versus a ballot measure?
I mean, I wouldn't put it out of the question. You know, it's really just hard to say.
Okay, but that's a possibility. There's a chance that we might. Okay.
It's not impossible.
Okay, just trying to understand here.
Yeah, lots of possibilities. Really, it's going to be quite a road.
Which is crazy because 24 hours ago, we thought all the possibilities were over, and it was congratulations, Maryland, Landover 2.0.
And let's all preface this with you know, the bill still has to be signed by the president. I guess that's the most immediate next step. Just to throw that out there.
All right, Joe. We need your signature one more time on one more thing before you're done. Meagan, anything else that the audience, Commanders fans that are interested in this should know, or have we covered all the ground here as we know it right now at 1:30 on Saturday, pending any other news that you guys report?
No, I think you've covered it.
All right. That's it then. Meagan Flynn, Washington Post. She, Aaron Cox, Sam Fortier, and their team are working on this. So make sure you stay tuned over at WashingtonPost.com/sports for all the latest updates. Meagan, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.